able to answer all your questions.
Great, so we'll get started. We hope that this webinar takes about 30 minutes or so. It really depends upon you. We'll sort of take the lead in the beginning by just talking a bit about Eisenhower Fellowships. What is its goal? What is its mission? What's our purpose here? What are we doing? And then we'll get into some of the specifics about the 3 distinct USA programs that we do offer and for which you can apply. And then we'll talk more about selection criteria, the application cycle, deadlines, and at the end we'll have ample time for everyone to sort of jump in and ask any and all questions that you have about any aspect of the process as well as our programs. Okay, so with that, let's begin. So what do we do? Well, we are Eisenhower Fellowships. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We've been around for more than 60 years. We were founded in 1953 by some supporters, Philadelphia area supporters of President Eisenhower. It was a gift to the president, the former president, on the occasion of his first birthday in the White House. And rather than asking for a plaque or a statue or something, President Eisenhower wanted something that was sort of meaningful and purposeful and that was sustainable. And this is what they came up with, this sort of ingenious idea, an international exchange program. In the beginning, it was simply international citizens coming to the United States for up to a year to immerse themselves in a different culture, in a different profession, and to get a sense of different sources of knowledge and expand their networks. In the beginning, that multicultural kind of experience is still the core of what we do, although we've kind of broadened our approach and our methodology a bit, as well as shortened the fellowship program length. As you can imagine, a year is a bit of a large time commitment. Now we run both 2 kinds of programs for international citizens as well as the program for USA citizens. Each year we send about 20 prominent mid-career U.S. leaders abroad to we have a network of more than 40 countries around the world. And they typically go from 4 to 6 weeks. And the idea is to still immerse yourself in another culture, to get a little bit outside your comfort zone, get a little uncomfortable, find yourself in a country or a situation where you're maybe forced to improvise a little bit and pull upon personal and professional resources that you don't normally do. It's also an opportunity to step outside your day-to-day job, to sort of take a break, decompress, disconnect, and sort of focus on something that's important to you and something that we hope has broader social impact. So to that end, what are we doing? We're trying to identify people we think are not just accomplished leaders, but people who have additional potential, additional headroom to go further and be more influential in their fields and in their broader society. Through our program, we're trying to provide a platform for increased access to contacts and knowledge abroad and empower and enable you to become, like we said, even more influential and to really have real-world impact. This is not just an exercise in reflection and knowledge gathering, although that is a key component. But at the end of the day, we want you to take all of that and use it in action. A sort of action-oriented fellowship is really our goal in the 21st century. And we're connecting you. We're connecting you to a network of 1,500 global leaders like yourself from the past 60 years, all engaged and united in this goal, this purpose of Eisenhower Fellowships. This is a lifelong engagement. We don't consider this to be a one-off experience. We expect a lifelong commitment to your purpose and to our shared mission here at Eisenhower Fellowships. And we consider all of you change agents, people trying to make the world a better place, to disrupt something. We consider the fellowship experience more or less transformative. That's mostly what our fellows try to tell us. It's unusual, and it's something that it's hard to anticipate or understand in a way. You think, oh, I'm going to take 6 weeks, I'll travel, I'll have these amazing adventures, I'll get connected, I'll have opportunities on the weekends for sightseeing. But at the same time, you're part of a group. This is a group experience. You're not alone. That you're going to be part of the USA program. You're part of 10 fellows traveling all around the world to different countries. If you're in the Zhixing program in China, you're all traveling at the same time to China. And if you're part of the agriculture program, you're a farmer who's now connected to around 25 other farmers in the country, all looking at ways to move agriculture forward. So this is not an individual or isolated experience, although, of course, each person has that customized itinerary program, which we'll talk more about, which is the unique component. But it's really about a group fellowship transformative experience. And why? Well, we're trying to make the world more prosperous, peaceful, and just. These are the values of Eisenhower Fellowships, and this is the values that he embodied as a president, as a leader, one of the world's first global leaders, and it's sort of the standard by which we measure ourselves today. Our mission is to identify, empower, and connect innovative leaders through a transformative fellowship experience and lifelong engagement in a global network of dynamic change agents. And this is cross-border, this is multidisciplinary, and it's cross-sectoral. So now I'm going to hand the microphone over to my colleague Shaylin Kurtz, and she's going to give you a more specific sense of the different kinds of programs and experiences that you might be interested in.
Hi everyone. So we have 3 different programs in our USA program. This is the USA Original Fellowship, the Zhurxing China Eisenhower Fellowship, and the USA Agriculture Fellowship. And we'll just go into each one for the next few slides. The USA Original Fellowship is our original fellowship. It involves individualized programming in 1 to 2 countries for 4 to 5 weeks. Fellows will travel individually throughout the 2017 calendar year based on their schedule, and we select 10 candidates for this program each year. Fellows will work with an EF staff program officer as well as an in-country coordinator to plan their programs and to ensure the most impactful trip. And you can see on the list on the slide that we offer over 40 countries for fellowship destinations. In your application, you would propose the countries you'd like to travel to and explain how these countries relate to the fulfillment of your objectives. Next, we have the Zhurxing China Eisenhower Fellowship, and this is the newest addition to our USA programs. The Zhurxing Fellowship began in 2014 as a partnership with the China Education Association for International Exchange. The Zhurxing, which literally means Learning and Travel Program, is a 4-week professional and leadership development program that takes ascendant American leaders to China. Fellows will travel as a group but also have individual programming in 4 to 6 cities in the country. And it's the same as the USA Fellowship, the original fellowship. Fellows will work with an EF program officer as well as a program officer in China. And these dates are already set for next year. It's for the month of June, so it'll be June 5th to the 30th of 2017. And 10 candidates will also be selected for this program. And last, we have the USA Agriculture Fellowship. This fellowship is identical in all ways to the USA Original Fellowship, except that the focus is on agriculture and that the fellowship is awarded to an active farmer or rancher. So the fellow will also travel individually throughout the year for 4 to 5 weeks in 1 to 2 countries based on their schedule, but we select 1 fellow for the agriculture program each year. Okay, now I'm going to pass it on to Natalie to talk a little bit about the selection criteria and program design.
Thanks, Shay. You now have an orientation to the different USA programs, and the next logical question is, great, who are you looking for? And this slide talks a little bit about the types of folks that we look for. As Jane mentioned, we're very much interested in action, so we're looking for people who have demonstrated that they have taken action before and they've been able to cause change and that they're committed to continuing to do that. So we also have a project component to the fellowship, that I'll talk about a little bit further in the next couple of slides. But we're also interested in folks who are excited and willing to engage in the network on an ongoing basis. As Jane mentioned, this isn't a one-off. This is a lifelong commitment, and you're among a group of really amazing people that you can both benefit from and contribute to, and we fully expect that you would do so. So the project component is something we implemented a few years ago, and that was really a bit of a shift. What we learned is that it's very easy to have a fascinating and interesting fellowship traveling around, meeting people in your field that are amazing leaders and learning a lot, but that it can easily end up with learning a bunch of things and not being able to do anything with them collectively. And so we implemented this idea of a project to be kind of the North Star of your fellowship. So it would be something that you determine in advance. You'll be asked about it in the application as to what project would you like to focus on. It doesn't need to be something that's fully thought through. It could be something that's started already, or that you're thinking about, and that the idea would be to use the fellowship to further the project. So you in any new project or idea, you may have hypotheses, you may have informational gaps, etc. And the idea would be to use the fellowship to test your ideas, test your hypotheses, and fill in those information gaps. One example I can give of this is an international fellow who came to the U.S. who was a very influential business person, but he also saw in his country of Sri Lanka the need to build entrepreneurship and the culture of entrepreneurship, as well as the need for small businesses for employment purposes. And so he had an idea of developing a business incubator. And he had partners on this idea, and he had a hypothesis, he had a kind of a skeleton of what he wanted this to look like. But he came to the U.S. and he met with a full range of people involved in that kind of work. So folks like at other incubators, people at universities teaching entrepreneurship, government officials responsible for small business development. And as a result of those meetings, he made some changes to his plans and also established some valuable relationships and partnerships as he took the project forward, which he has since launched. Also in your application, you'll be asked to provide a sample program. And basically what this is asking you to envision, if I were awarded this fellowship and I went to country X, what types of people and who might I want to meet with and why? And this really does require some work on your end, and we encourage you to be thoughtful and do some research, talk to some people about this, to think about who would you want to meet with and why would you want to meet with them. And if you are awarded the fellowship, we will actually start with this draft program as we work with you to further develop it into what your ultimate program will be. So it's something that takes a little bit of a commitment, but it's really worth doing. I think it benefits both you as you think about engaging in a fellowship, and certainly us as we think about your interests and how we could meet those during the fellowship. Oops. So we're going to talk a little bit about some example fellows to give you an idea of the types of folks that we work with. Catherine Finney, who's on the bottom right of this slide, is a USA fellow this year. She successfully launched her own tech business years ago, and as she was kind of moving through life and having meetings and launching her business, she noticed that she was really the only woman and certainly the only person of color in almost every interaction she had. And she started to question, why is this the case? And what are we doing to be more inclusive in the tech sector? And as a result, she founded Digital Undivided, which is committed to exactly that, inclusion in this space. And she's made a lot of great progress and received a lot of recognition as a result of it. And she's a fellow that's going to be going this year to Indonesia and Thailand to look exactly at those same issues as to how those cultures are extending inclusivity in technology to minorities and women. And there's a few others that I think some of my colleagues will also address.
Shay, do you want to talk a little bit about Kelly Pollock?
Kelly Pollock, who you'll see in the top left, she's the executive director for the Center of Creative Arts, or COCA, in St. Louis, Missouri. And she's really been a change agent for arts in her community and schools in St. Louis. She's going to travel to Ireland and Brazil this year to kind of see how she can get this, the arts to the next level, and to really use the arts to bridge divides in communities as well as schools through education in St. Louis.
Yeah, we have two other fellows here now. Adam Grossman in the bottom left, he's a 2014 fellow. He's from the Boston area, as you can see. And he traveled to China and Taiwan, and he was really looking at sports. I mean, he's looking specifically at baseball and the market in China and Taiwan and Asia more generally to see what kind of interest there was. He was looking at marketing strategies and business, and he's a really interesting guy. He's the kind of guy who has a sort of an interesting network that crosses sports and entertainment and business, marketing and management, which makes him kind of this sort of ideal multidisciplinary kind of leader and influencer in not just the sort of baseball and sports management area, but beyond. So he's a really just great guy. Now the other person in the upper right is Stacy Chang. He's currently based in Austin, Texas, leading a design institute for health at the University of Austin. He founded this institute recently, Prior to that, he was head of IDEO's healthcare practice based in Palo Alto, California. And he's an interesting fellow. He traveled to Kenya and Sweden on fellowship. In each case, he was looking at the healthcare industry, looking at the structure of government, how the healthcare is provided by the government, how it's provided by the private sector, and if there are gaps in coverage, what sort of things are going on. And so he was looking at cultural issues, he was looking at management issues, and he was looking at provision and quality. Of course, Sweden and Kenya were sort of very interesting for him in terms of contrast. Sweden being this very progressive, sort of culturally forward kind of area in terms of healthcare, and then going to Kenya where you saw smaller providers, smaller hospitals trying to fill the gap. And so he was looking at ways that technology and design could further healthcare provision in both countries. So these are just a few examples of the kinds of candidates that we have selected and that we feel are sort of very emblematic of the kind of progress, change, and impact that we'd like to see in Eisenhower Fellows. So what's going on for this year, for the 2017 application cycle? So as you know from our website, you can link directly to the online application. We're not accepting any paper or emailed applications, so please fill it out online. We're having this webinar today. We're having another one April 25th at 2 p.m. It'll be more or less the same information as we've done today. So if you've tuned in today, there's no need to come back. June 6, 2016 at 9 a.m. All applications are due. We do not accept late applications. What we're going to do after this is look through all the applications that we received, and we're going to decide whom we have further interest in. And if we have some interest in you, we're probably going to reach out and schedule a phone call to talk more about your application, to learn a little bit more, piece out any questions or doubts that we might have. So I would assume that by early to mid-July, if we have further interest in you, we will be reaching out and you'll receive an email and we'll schedule a telephone call. After that, if we continue to have interest in you, if we find you are engaging and appealing to us as a candidate, we will schedule an in-person interview with you. Where this interview takes place really depends on where you live. If you live somewhere on the East Coast, most likely we will bring you into Philadelphia for an in-person interview. It'll be about a 30-minute interview with our selection committee, which will be a few leaders and fellows from Eisenhower Fellowships. We also have, as you may have seen in our website, regional hubs where we have local leaders who help us they sort of act as our scouts and help us identify candidates and get the word out about EF. We currently have 5: San Francisco, Chicago, North Carolina, Boston, Philadelphia, and St. Louis. And if you are sort of located closer to one of those regional hubs, we will schedule the in-person interview in that regional hub. We cover transportation, airfare, train, bus, as well as one-night hotel accommodations for everyone who's invited to an in-person interview. We expect to make final selection decisions by October 2016. At that time, between October, November, December, that's when the planning for your fellowship would begin. If there's one thing, I mean, we can talk about a little bit further in the Q&A portion, is that your fellowship really is, your engagement with Eisenhower Fellowships begins the moment you're selected. We need you to start thinking about where you really are going on fellowship, when you're going, how you're going, what are you going to do, and start working through your program design. So starting in November 2016, if you are selected, we really will begin to work closely with you. Shay and Natalie are the program officers who would be kind of your coaches in this process, helping you to sort of think through, critically question your project and initiative, and turn it into something that we can really build a fellowship around. So that's pretty much all that we have to say. That's the overview. That's sort of the big picture information. At this time, we're happy to take any questions that you might have about specifics, talk more in depth about any particular aspect of our program or one of our programs. If you're more interested in the China program rather than the USA program, we can talk more in depth about what that looks like. So at this point, we'll just hand it over to you. Please, if you would like to ask a question, why don't you unmute yourself. Just say, hello, my name is such and such. I'd like to ask a question, and please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jill Reynolds. I have a question. It sounds like for the purposes of the visits to the countries selected that you would would you need to do those in the same, like all within one 5-week period, or could you do one country, over the course of 2 to 3 weeks, and then another country 6 months later over the course of 2 to 3 weeks? What's the flexibility for something like that?
Hi, Jill. Sorry, I think we were muted on our side. We actually are pretty flexible in that. We have several fellows this year who are breaking up their trips, so they'll do, 2.5 weeks in Ireland and 2.5 weeks in Brazil, and then we have several who will just do the whole thing at one time. So it really is up to you. The only thing is if you break up the trip, we only pay for one round trip ticket, so you'll be responsible for one of your tickets.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Pamela Santos. I have a question. With the program or project component, can you give a sense of how structured you want to see that at the point of application? You had said it doesn't have to be like a concrete project, but can you give a little bit more guidelines of, sort of what pieces you do look for to be in place at that point?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So, the more concrete the better, of course, but we also understand that sometimes these things are evolving. So what we would ask you to do in the application is to take a shot at describing a project that would benefit from the fellowship. What we of course allow is that project may evolve between the time of your application and your fellowship, and certainly during your fellowship. So quite frequently we see, especially during the fellowship, that as a result of the learnings, as a result of the meetings that someone is having, they actually adjust their project and in some cases change it, wholesale, because they're learning that their original idea won't work or that there's something else that's more important to do. So that's the kind of flexibility we're really okay with, but we do really want to see that you've got something aspirational, concrete, that we could build a fellowship around at the time that you apply, because that helps us understand how you're going to use the fellowship. So it's very important.
Okay. So are you looking for sort of a project plan at that point, or just an executive summary?
An executive summary. We'll ask. It's a question in the application where we ask you to describe it in kind of paragraph form, and so pointing out what the project is and how the fellowship could help further the project is really a summary of what we're looking for.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think to add to that, you also want to think a little bit about why it's important, like why should we care about your project? Like, for example, if we're, to refer to Natalie's earlier example of the businessman in Sri Lanka, I mean, there's a reason that he's picking entrepreneurship for Sri Lanka. It's not just sort of a random idea. I mean, he feels that that culturally there is a need to create new business, to create jobs, to improve the economic status of sort of a large group of people who've been in a state of conflict for 30 years. So you have a lot of young people, you have a lot of unemployment. So, you have to sort of give us a few sentences about why we should care. And also, I would say on the back end, think a little bit about the impact. Like, again, like, how are you going to impact more than, 2 people with your project? And I would also think a little bit about sustainability. Although, like Natalie said, you can't answer all these questions. Some of them may change, they may morph. That's totally fine. But just to know, like, what are you thinking? Where are you going? And something that we can sort of grab onto and work with and discuss with you, it would be great.
Okay, great. That helps. Thank you.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Excuse me, I'm trying to figure out how to mute the button, but anyway, thank you for the nice presentation. My question is, what's the difference between the U.S. fellowship and the China fellowship? I noticed the U.S. fellowship that you can select a country for visit. For example, I select China as the country to visit. So is there any kind of overlap between the Zhuxing China fellowship and the U.S. fellowship, or should I apply in the
Yeah, if you want to go to China, you have to apply for the Zhuxing China Fellowship. China is not offered as a country in the USA program any longer. We have an exclusive relationship with the Ministry of Education, so that is all of our China programming is now focused on the Zhuxing China program with the cohort. If you are still interested in Asia and you want to go on the USA Fellowship, we offer Taiwan. We offer a number of Southeast Asian countries. There's India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and so forth. But China is that 4-week commitment in June. Otherwise, there really isn't a difference. You're going to see that the requirements are the same. The application is virtually identical. The period of travel is a little bit shorter in China, but otherwise, it's kind of the same thing.
I see. Okay, great. Thank you. Another question is, I noticed that it specified an age range, 35 to 45. Is this the absolute requirement, or is it still flexible?
It's kind of flexible. I mean, we give it as sort of a general guideline because what we are looking at is the mid-career kind of sweet spot. So someone who's had a few years experience under their belt, they have some achievements, they've probably achieved some degree of leadership and influence in their field, their community. So we usually say that's around 32 to 45 years old. And you don't want to go too high in terms of age because then people kind of peak. I mean, they become too influential and sort of too indispensable in their field, and the sort of impact of the fellowship, that transformative nature, sort of begins to diminish, over time. It's a guideline. If you're a little bit under or a little bit over, it's not a problem. Please feel free to apply. We certainly, welcome any and all applicants, but know that the further outside of the range that you fall, the less competitive you become. So if you're under 30 or over 50, your chances of selection start to really go down. Just because the pool is competitive enough that it becomes, all other things being equal, it's sort of, it's less compelling for us.
Okay, all right, okay. So I take it as a range between 30 to 50.
Yeah.
Okay.
45, I'd say.
Ideally under 45, but
correct, yeah.
Below 50.
Got
it. Okay, thank you.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, this is Trina Middleton. Thank you so much for the presentation. My question was just in regards to the type of program. Is there any particular programs that you are actually looking for? Is it completely open into to what you're interested in supporting for applicants?
So just to make sure I understand your question, are you thinking about the project element, or are you thinking about your background, the sector that you work in?
Oh, I'm sorry, the program element. Mm-hmm.
The program design element, you mean? Yeah, the project.
Yes.
Yeah, no, we really, the one thing we look for is, we have really clear lines around that this is not a business trip and it's not a fundraising trip. So obviously we don't want projects that are trying to do either of those things. And we look for your project to be impactful and relevant to your society, wherever you're coming from. So we're definitely going to focus on impact and relevance. But as to what it is and what sector, we're agnostic, so we're very open. We've had people whose projects have been, almost 100% around economic development. We've had projects that are focused on arts. We've had, a full range. So there's really no bias in your background as to your profession, nor in your project focus.
Okay, thank you. And actually, you brought up something in regards to background. So what if, I'll just be honest, in my case, I'm just finishing a master's program, so I'm considering moving from what I'm currently doing into a completely different sector. So how would that play into the application? So if I'm in, say, development, I'm moving more into working maybe within the arts and culture field.
What I would suggest is that you clearly articulate that in your application as to kind of, there are sections about what you're doing now and your role, but I think if you're contemplating a move out of that and that you may want to use the fellowship to springboard that, I think the more you can disclose about that, that's very helpful to us. We frequently had fellows who, after their fellowship, make a change, so that's not foreign to us at all, but it would be helpful to us to know where you are now and what your thoughts are about the future.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Lasu Mamaya. Thank you so much for your presentation. I have a couple questions. The first one is, do fellows have to have language proficiency for the countries that they're proposing to travel to? And if not, how is that handled? Is there a translator that comes along with them with their meetings and explorations? And then my other question is, does the application require letters of recommendation?
To answer your first question, no, it is not required that you're proficient in the language where you're traveling to. We'll work with you. It's usually case by case, so and many times we will have to hire a translator and they will travel with you if necessary.
Okay.
What was your second question?
Whether the application requires letters of recommendation?
No.
It does not require letters of recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, if there's no more questions, we can
Hi.
Oh, someone's in there. All right, you just made it in. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Dave Wishu. I actually don't have a question for myself, but it looks like Paul has a question about elaboration on expectations of the Xijing program. So I don't know if you want to just speak to that. And
Okay, expectations. Let me see.
yeah, it's in the chat area.
Okay, can you elaborate? Okay, sorry, we missed it. Yeah, okay, so Zhisheng travels as a group, meaning that everyone goes, comes and goes on the same dates to China. So it is organized a little bit more like our international program. So the 10 Zhisheng Fellows would travel to Beijing and do an opening seminar about 2.5 to 3 days in Beijing together. And this would be orientation to Chinese culture, politics. We would, last year it was hosted at a local university, Renmin University, and we heard from some professors, some academics, practitioners, and so forth, a few Eisenhower Fellows. We have a fairly large group of China Fellows, international Fellows there, who come in, they host dinners, they talk about different aspects of China and sort of answer general questions to sort of orient you to the country. We do a little bit of survival Chinese, get you some basic Chinese phrases, although you do have a translator or interpreter assigned to you who travels with you throughout the program. Each Zhisheng Fellow gets their own interpreter who stays with them the whole time. And then you have 2.5 weeks, which is the customized fellowship experience, and from there each person sort of goes out on their own. Of course, you crisscross around the country, you overlap, so a couple of you may go first to Xi'an, have a couple days, then someone goes to Chengdu, and then you're off to Shanghai or Guangzhou in the south. But there is a closing seminar about 2 days where everyone comes back together as a group in Shanghai at the very end. So you have the beginning and the end, sort of the what do you call them, bookends of the program where everyone's together, and then you have 2.5 weeks where you're going around the country, and you may find yourself in the same city with 2 to 3 other fellows, but each day you have your own schedule, which is personalized. Each Zhisheng Fellow is assigned their own program officer in China, in addition to a program officer here in our Eisenhower headquarters in Philadelphia. So you have 2 people kind of working with you to develop your program. And that's it. I'm trying to think. There's only one, I wouldn't call it a restriction to the Zhisheng program, which is that we don't cover travel to Hong Kong and Tibet. While you're free to go to both of those locations while you're in China, it's not covered under our program because China's pretty big, so we want you to really focus on sort of the main core of central China and the big cities. Well, they're all big cities, but to focus on the cities there. So if you're going to do sightseeing in those other areas, I suggest you do it outside of the fellowship period because it is a fairly tight fellowship period. It's 4 weeks. That's not a lot of time, and it would be at your own expense. Okay? Let's see if we missed any other questions.
This is Jill Reynolds again. If I could ask one more question. Could you talk a little bit more about what the fellowship does cover? You mentioned in the response to my question that it covers one round trip airfare ticket to one location, but could you talk a little bit more about what else it covers?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost entirely fully funded by Eisenhower Fellowship. So what we cover is international economy class travel for the fellow. We provide you with per diem funds to cover meals and incidental expenses such as taxis, tipping, sort of random things, and that is based on the U.S. Department of State per diems. There's a formula, you can find it on their website, that tells you, in Dublin it's $80 a day, in Jakarta it's $79. So we calculate that for you based on the number of days that you're in each city and each country. We pay for all of your hotels. We book and pay for, business class hotels, very comfortable in safe locations. And all of this is provided to you sort of upfront in the sense that you should not have to put out any money to cover your fellowship program expenses such as hotels, transportation, and meals and incidentals. If you're going to do a little extra sightseeing or try to get off the beaten path for personal reasons, that would be at your own expense, although we do try to help get you around. We cover interpretation when needed in any meetings. We translate documents as needed. I'm trying to think. In-country travel, if you're traveling locally by train, by bus, by car, sometimes people rent a car and drive around. We cover all of those expenses as long as it's fellowship related and is relevant to the purpose of your travel. We cover all of it. But you may find if you want to go out for a special dinner, buying gifts for friends and so forth, you're going to have to bring, of course, some of your own money and have your own credit cards on hand. But if you need a visa, we cover visa fees. Any sort of fellowship-related business expenses, healthcare, yes, we do purchase health insurance from International SOS to cover the period of your travel. In case there's any emergency, we can get you airlifted out. That's pretty much everything. I mean, it is all economy class. We don't cover business class. We don't do upgrades. If you want to upgrade, you can do it, but that will be at your own expense, and that's something we can talk about later. One of the unique things about Eisenhower Fellowships, and this sort of dates from our earlier days when it was longer, is that all of partners and spouses are invited to join. If your partner or spouse is able to travel for up to 14 days, and that's the minimum, they have to travel 14 days, we will also cover their travel. We will cover one economy class airfare, round-trip airfare for the partner or spouse, and give them a per diem of $50 a day to cover their meals. Because we really do want this to be an inclusive experience, and your spouses are invited to events here in Philadelphia. All USA Fellows are invited to an opening seminar in Philadelphia. It's 3 days here in Philadelphia, typically in the spring and early April. Spouses are invited to that. Again, we cover round-trip economy class airfare or trains to Philadelphia. Your accommodations here, we provide meals. And you also are invited to a closing seminar the following year to receive your Eisenhower pin and participate in the seminar with our chairman, General Powell. And again, your spouse is invited to come to these social events. Now, partners and spouses are not invited to fellowship meetings unless there's really an overlap. For example, if you're both co-founders of the same company and partners, in that case, we might make an exception. But by and large, the fellowship program is for the fellows, so spouses are not invited on the fellowship meetings. But anything social, if there's a dinner with Eisenhower Fellows in Ireland or in Germany, your partner is absolutely welcome to come. We really believe that's a nice thing to do. Zhurxing is different. Thank you, Natalie. She's reminded me that in the case of Zhurxing, spouses are not invited. And that's simply because it's, number one, a much shorter program, and it's a little more disruptive to have your spouse there in the sense that it may impede your ability to have a more meaningful fellowship experience. And it's also, since it's a partnership with the Ministry of Education, it's something that they sort of asked us to think about. Maybe we'll incorporate it in a couple of years, but in these early kind of pilot years of the program, it's just not a possibility.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think that we've had a lot of really great questions. I hope that they've answered your issues. If at any time you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to it, reach out to us. We're here. You still have, another month and a half before the application is due, and we'd be happy to talk to you more about the application process and selection criteria and answer any doubts. But thank you again for taking the time to join us. It's been a pleasure to speak to you and take your questions. This webinar is being recorded, and I will be posting the slides and the recording on our website in the next 24 to 48 hours. And please feel free to listen to it again and share it. Thank you.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Now, bye-bye.